Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to discuss the last topic related to the ultimacy. It means related to the ultimate realities. After this, we are left with only Panyati and Dhamma Dhammatha, and then one method called Ekattanaya and Nanattanaya. So that will conclude our lectures regarding the ultimacy. So today we are going to talk about space according to the Theravada tradition, and also about the time, how it has been defined. So before we enter into the topic, if you remember, we already discussed what is the ultimacy, Paramattas, and there were a group in between the Paramattas were divided into two as conditioned and unconditioned, and then something other than the Paramatta were called the Panyatis, the concepts, and then in between we found some other natures which were Anipanna Rupas, some attributes of certain matter. Then we found Tilakkana, the three characteristics, universal characteristics, certain conditional forces, Ekaccha Pacce Sati. And then we also discussed about the Gati last week. There is a state which determines certain attributes of the living beings who are born in certain realms. Then today we are going to talk about space, which is not that much discussed in the Theravada tradition, but which has been mentioned in some other Buddhist sects. And then we have time, which is a conceptual idea according to the Theravadians, but then we have to understand why they consider it as something conceptual. So these are the this will be the discussion today. So before we go into the topic, I would like to draw the diagram again to make it clearer where we are. So we start with Paramattas, and we have condition Sankata, Paramatta, then Asankata, Paramatta. Then under Sankata we have Paramatta Dhammas, then we have Uppadino Dhamma. Paramatta Dhammas were the realities which arise together with some other realities. It was divided into Nama and Rupa. Right. The Uppadino Dhamma are the realities, resultant mentalities and materiality that is supposed to happen after the karma has gained the opportunity. Then we have Paramatta Jatika, then we have finally Anuppanna Dhamma. Right, Anuppanna Dhamma. Then in the Asankata Paramatta group, we had 5 unconditioned realities, 5 types of nirvana. I am not going to write it here. Then there were the concepts, Panyati. We have 3 types of Panyati. I will be discussing them next week. Nama Panyati, mainly 2, Atta Panyati. Then something called Saddha Panyati, which I put in a star, because which is not very commonly discussed. Then in between we had some other natures, Anipanna Rupas. These are the certain attributes of the matter which are not ultimate realities. Then Ekaccha Pacce Sati, certain conditional forces. Sati is Shakti, certain conditional forces. Then we have Tilakkana. Tilakkana are the 3 universal characteristics. Then we have Gati and so forth, as we discussed last time. Then today we have Ajatakasa, the space, infinite space. And then we have something called Kala, the time, which is a concept. So, but I will be discussing it here. It's Atta Panyati actually. We are going to discuss Asakasa and Kala today. So, this is our topic. Then other than that, in the chart we have Dhamma and Dhammata. Dhamma and Dhammata. Dhammata, another word for Dhammata is Niyama. Then we have 5 types of Niyama, which we will discuss in the topic after Panyati. Then finally, I will be talking about another topic called Ekattanaya and Nanattanaya. The method of considering group of things as oneness, and things as various things, the diverse method, like that we'll discuss about that, because we sometimes have to take the entire life, all the namarupas in one life as one thing, one life. At the same time, separate realities that occur in one life are separate natures, they are not the same. So likewise, we have a method called Nanattanaya and Ekattanaya, which is utterly necessary to understand the Paramatta in Theravada tradition. Today we are discussing about the Ajatakasa, the space, and also later we will discuss something about the time, which is a very profound topic in the scientific world, and there was a great breakthrough made by Albert Einstein. As we all know, he gave the idea of space and time, which were considered as separate entities, separate fundamentals in the scientific world. He combined them and called something called space-time, because they are something together, some kind of a dimension or something like that, which he combined as and advocated the idea of space-time. So then, but traditionally in the Eastern philosophy, especially in the Theravada tradition, we take space as something that exists, but time is a conceptual thing. So it is not something that really exists in the reality. It is not a fundamental. It is something that is created by mind, a synthetic object of the mind looking into the generation of ultimate realities. So we will come into that point in later, the end part of our lecture. So what is the space? Space means the area where the realities exist. Space is the area or the place, the location where the realities exist. If there was no such a space, the empty space, realities cannot exist. There is no possibility that the realities could exist without the space. So is space something that really exists? So if it exists, why it is not considered as ultimate reality? So these things that we have to understand. Because according to Theravada tradition, reality, the Paramatta Dhamma, is something related to arising. Asankata Paramattas does not arise. So therefore, space has no beginning according to Theravada literature. It has an infinite beginning. Like it had never began, unlike the Big Bang theory. So then, but the Big Bang theory has its own evidences, own arguments, like the red shift and all these how the functions are, and also some photos taken from the lights that were in the prehistorical universe. They have some of their grounds to stand upon. The main idea came by the Edwin Hubble's through his telescope, that they found that all the planets and the spatial objects are moving away from each other. So it came to the idea that they came to the idea that if they are moving always away from each other, millions of years ago, billions of years ago, they were close to each other, and then they found that they all should come into one location, and the entire universe emerged from this tiny spot, and the emergence, which is called the Big Bang. And also there was information which suddenly inflamed the universe in a split of a second. So therefore we have this present universe. That is how the scientifically they would explain, and they also have some problems in solving it completely, like the question of horizon, and some other, how the distribution of atoms within atom and energy within the entire space, observable universe. So there are some things that, and also the idea regarding entropy, the second law of thermodynamics.
So these are the things that have not been solved in terms of Big Bang, but it is a theory that has good solid grounds in terms of scientific research. So, but we are not going to compare it. We are just going to say how the Buddha or the Theravada tradition has explained or have believed or advocates about the space and time. Space, according to Theravadians, has no beginning. It was there forever, and it is not something that can happen. It is the empty area where the things could locate. If there was no space, there is no location of the realities to happen. So it's not a reality, it's not an ultimate Paramattha Dhamma, because Paramattha Dhammas are always related with arising together with some other realities. Space is not something that arises. So then can't we call it Asankata Paramattha? That's another good question. Asankata Paramattha doesn't have a beginning. It also has been there forever. But the thing is, according to Theravadians, the definition of Asankata Paramattha is the absence or the liberation from the suffering that is going to come. The liberation from the suffering that is about to happen. So space doesn't have that attribute. It is not a liberation. It is just the empty space where things are located. So therefore, it is not the Asankata Paramattha. It doesn't fit the definition of Asankata according to Theravadians. Asankata is, it has no beginning. But the realities that are considered in Theravada has another extra definition, that is the liberation from the suffering that is going to happen. So therefore, in terms of considering the beginning, we can call the space as Asankata, but in terms of the entire definition of Asankata according to Theravadians, it cannot come into this group because it's not a liberation. The next thing is, especially then someone can ask the question, isn't it the last two nirvanas? Just we'll leave these two for the time being. Is it the last two nirvanas? The last two means the great nirvana, the empty. We sometimes Buddha has mentioned it as an emptiness. The thing is, when we see the nirvana, when we observe the nirvana, it is able to support us in eradicating the defilements. Because seeing the nirvana, observing the nirvana, Magga Chitta becomes capable of eradicating the defilements. So eventually eradicating the suffering that is going to happen. But just observing the space, no such phenomena is going to happen. One is not going to get liberated from suffering. One is not going to eradicate the defilements just by observing the empty space. So empty space doesn't have that glory, doesn't have that strength, doesn't have that attribute which supports the mind to eradicate the defilements. So therefore, it is not identical with the nirvana. Nirvana has some other great capacities, great attributes. The space is just the emptiness where the realities could locate. But when we only consider about the arising, it doesn't have a reason, arising, and it doesn't have an end. So therefore, space can be termed as Asankata. There are some Theravadian teachers not listing them as Asankata, but have mentioned space is a Asankata thing. It doesn't have a beginning, so it is unconditioned. There are places where some well-learned Theravadians have mentioned this, but it is not found within the Theravada doctrine. I have not found yet. Then, but there was some other Buddhist sects that considered about 6 types of Asankata, not these 5. Parinirvana, the complete cessation of the suffering, and also the cessation of defilements, and one is the space. Space is considered as unconditioned in some Buddhist sects. So therefore, how do we know the existence of space according to the tradition? It is known through the pressure. The same amount of elements kept in a certain space gives a certain pressure to its surface. But if we reduce this space, if we make it smaller, what happens? The pressure increases. So it shows that there is an effect of the space. So space is something that really exists. So earlier the realities, the atoms existed in a certain space. So when we reduce it, so it gave a different pressure to the surface. So therefore, space is something that we can know through our wisdom. So though it is not located in the list of paramatthas, it is something that really exists. It should be known with the emptiness, allowing the realities to exist in it. So now we'll go into some practical we will try to locate where the space and time, how Theravadians locate in regard to the idea of space and time. Now we'll explain briefly about time, then we'll go into a longer discussion what it is. Time is considered as a concept in the Theravada tradition. Space is not a concept. It's not something that is synthesized by the mind. It is where we exist. So therefore space exists according to Theravadians. But time is something that we create in our mind, observing the happening or the generation of realities. For instance, according to Theravadians, chitta, all the chittas in the universe have the same speed. They arise and pass away. Then locating, like if we think about the beginning of this chitta and the passing away of this chitta, just observing this incidents, these 4 chittas, we try to create idea a time, idea of time A. Then looking into this point and this point of 6 chittas, we create an idea of a time B. So it's relative. We get the happening of chitta. So what has happened according to Theravadian? This is how a Theravadian would look into the idea of concept. So there are 4 chittas. Here is 4 chittas. Here we have 6 chittas. Four chittas and 6 chittas. So what really happens is the chittas, incidences, actions. We also define that this chitta, the time for the arising and the time for the passing away is equal in all chittas. Normally defined same, equal. So looking into the happening of 4 chittas and happening of 6 chittas in the ordinary normal proceeding of the mind, if the mind happens to happen, sometimes there are 2 occasions where the mind can be stopped. So sometimes for example, if you are in asanya satta, the mind may stop and it may arise later on. So these are exceptional cases. Also when someone is nirodha samapatti, the attainment of cessation, this kind of phenomenon happen. All the other times chitta happens in the same speed we call. So now looking into these 2 incidences, we have the idea that it took more time to come into this level than here. So what has happened is only 4 chittas have occurred, 6 chittas have occurred. Looking into this experience, we create in mind a relative idea that this time was longer than this. So time is something that is created. There's a time capsule in our mind. Time capsule doesn't mean it's the ultimate reality. The nature of the mind to create the time. The mind has the ability to create the time. Then, therefore, according to the tradition, now we say time A is smaller than time B. Why is that? 6 chittas have occurred. So the happening of chitta is what happens. Now someone can ask the question, can't we see a spending of something, the passing away of something? So in the Theravada tradition, Theravada philosophical point of view, what we think is the happening of a chitta. The happening of a chitta. An incident. This is a reality. Knowing an object, the action of knowing an object happens. And it happens now. How do we know that they have the same amount of time? They occur in the same amount of time. So it shows that. Now for instance, if we think, we say they take the same, we normally use the word time. Then someone can ask the question, you define the chitta based on time. We say the arising time and the passing away time are equal. Every chitta has the same speed. They happen and occur and pass away at the same time, in the same sequence, same speed. So the time that happens to every chitta is equal. So it shows that our definition about chitta is based on time. So time should be something fundamental, more fundamental, basic fundamental than the chitta. Because if we are defining chitta based on time, and chitta is a reality, time should also be a reality. It's a very, very practical and obvious question. Because if I say every chitta has the same time lifespan, the arising and passing away also has the same lifespan, so we are talking about the time. So how a Theravadian would solve this problem? So how do we know the chittas have the same speed? For instance, if chitta A happens to the person A, if a person A chitta happens to the person B, if the chitta occurs together, for something to happen together, we don't need the time of idea of time, because these two things can be put together into the sky. It can happen at the same time. So therefore, we don't need the definition of time to classify the occurrence, how do you call it, not spontaneously, at the same time, if the occurrence happens in the same time. So the person B's chitta also happens in the same time. What happens? They passes away together. They passes away together. So then we conclude that both the chittas have the same time. So therefore we say each chitta have the same time, means same speed. They occur and pass away at the same speed, at the same time, together we call. Then how do we define that each and every arising and passing have also the same time? So if person A's chitta occurs here and passes away, now to define that, this is the speed of the arising. Speed of the arising stops when it comes to the peak level and it starts to decline. That is measured by the strength of the chitta, not by time. The strength of the chitta increases and then suddenly it drops down. So where the place where the increasing stops, actually it should happen in this way. The strength, the diagram of strength should be in this manner, right, in this manner. And also it should be like the dropping down happens more faster, but the time we take the same. Even though the slope is much larger, the timing happens the same time. So how do we define that they have the same time? So if the person A's chitta occurred and when its growth stops, growth means not the growing of the chitta as a reality, the strength, the growing of the strength stops. Think, as soon as it stops, person B's chitta starts to occur. Then what happens? As soon as the same time it passes away, completely vanishes, the time B's chitta growth stops. The growth of the time person B's chitta, not time, person B's chitta stops here. So therefore, this time and this time are equal. And when we have an equal time for the entire chitta, we can conclude that this time and this time are equal, right? So we come into with that formula. If the entire chitta has the same lifespan, and if the arising of a chitta, the stop of the growth of the arising, and is equal to the time it takes to completely vanishes. If these occurrences happen together, we don't need an extra time to define this equality. We don't need to define that equality. So therefore, even though we use the word time to define the chitta, time is not necessarily to be fundamental according to the tradition. So then one can ask a question, what is this time, like how long it happens? How long this incident happens? For that we go into the idea of realities. There are certain actions that occur. Chitta is a one action. That action has already been, the nature of that action has already been predetermined by the nature, law, determined by the law. So therefore, Theravadians, one can ask a question, how many sections then can you divide in this action? How many sections, sub moments that can you divide? The Theravadians do not go into that kind of an analysis. This normally, practically, it's a one mind moment, but based on the strength of the mind moment, we define at 2 subsections. Some would say 3, some would say 2. I would go with the 2 idea, much easier to explain. So one subsect of this act, we don't go into further division. If someone asks the question, how long this takes, what is that time period that passes, we normally define it, it's a one occurrence, one action, a certain happening. There is no way to subsect this happening. So therefore, now someone can ask the question, what is the moment of now in each and every moment? How deep can we go into that, penetrate into that moment? Theravadians do not go into advocate such idea, but if we go into and find out that idea, maybe this theory may break down, may fall down. But anyway, Theravadians stop here and say this is just certain happenings of the happenings of a certain action, that is called the happening of a chitta. Both the simultaneously both the actions happen, they arise and pass away simultaneously, and then the first half and the second half of this act also have a same, they happen together. If something happens, if some second chitta arises at the halfway of the first chitta, the halfway of the second chitta will be accomplished at the passing away of the first chitta. So therefore, we come into the idea that these chittas have the same lifespan, the same amount of lifespan. So therefore, the Theravadians do not need the fundamental idea of time to define the chitta. So what is fundamental are the happenings of chittas and chetasikas and rupas. If we try to subsect this, divide this happening, then we can think about something else, like go into the idea of then it become unrealistic. What is the actual moment of nowness? Someone can think about it, but practically, even this moment is not perceivable at the practical life. What happens is a chitta occurs, so we get to know about the present moment. We get to know about a certain object. So therefore, according to Theravadians, looking into the process of realities, the idea of time is something that is created in mind. It's not something realistic according to them. So this is how we define the time, and now we come into the to see where the Theravadians are located in the idea of space and time in the philosophical world. So there were some philosophers who thought there is no space, there is no reality called space. So they consider space as not existing, and even time as not existing. There were some philosophers in the Western world, they consider space is something relative, it's not something that really exists. Then some considered space as existing but not the time. They start to argue time is something, it's looking into 2 different locations of the life. We take the idea of time, but otherwise you cannot feel the passing away of time. Then based on that, sometimes we can have another idea, but I'm not sure if there was any person who had this idea, didn't believe in time but believed in, didn't accept the space but accept the time. And then we have space and both time, the idea of space and time. And finally, we have the idea of space-time. That is where the modern science is talking about after the relative theory, that theory of relativity. Now, Theravadians, according to Theravadians accept the idea of space, but they do not consider time as a reality fundamental. They consider time as a conceptual thing. So the Theravadians are here. Is accepting the time, but not accepting the space, sorry, I beg your pardon, but not the time. Then I would also like to talk about the idea of time, how we can look into this idea of time, some deeper insights about this idea of time. Time related to the nowness. This moment. So what is the exact present? It is this moment. So you cannot stop it. It suddenly passes away. It's very difficult to define. Even 1 second cannot be called now, because we can have milliseconds. We can have milliseconds. So we can microseconds. We can go further, and there's an infinite way of dividing if we talk about time related to nowness. Then another explanation that we can have is time related to decaying. Decaying. Time related to decaying. What do I mean here? There are two ways to look into this. We'll think about the entire body of a living being. A human body and a divine body. Human life or divine life. Even the humans and divine beings are born together simultaneously. We know that according to the literature, humans would pass away die within 100 years, for example. But it is said the divine beings could last for millions of years. The lowest divine realm, one's body can start for 9 million years. So it shows that the decaying speed in the divine realm, when we take one body as a one thing, body is composed with various kinds of rupa. But if we consider it as a one thing, the process of decaying happens slowly in the divine realm. And it's also quite different, the process of decaying, because as said in the literature, divine beings, hair doesn't grow gray, or the skin doesn't get into wrinkles. So it's a different process, but still they die one day. So the decaying happens in a slower speed when compared to a body, but it is different for the humans. And this relative decaying can be also found in the animal realm. We know the turtles can live for hundreds of years. Some sharks could live for 500 years, as some suggest, that some researchers hypothesize that there are sharks that have lived for hundreds of years. So therefore, the time related to decaying is quite relative when we consider it as a one body. We are not talking about a one reality, we are talking about a one body. So this relativeness in decaying can be seen in the human realm and the divine realm, and also in between the animal realms. And also within the human realm, some people's bodies get decay faster than others. And there are some sicknesses that some people would die within few years, getting completely old. There is a sickness called like that. So therefore, this decaying, time related to decaying, when we consider it as for the body and for entire life, it is something relative. Then we come into the idea of time related to the decaying of a reality. That was the group of reality. Now we take about the time related to the reality, a chitta of a person A. Chitta arises and passes away. Then person B, we think about a divine realm, for example, right? Chitta B. This is human. This is deity. So according to the Theravadians, what they are saying, the chitta, the speed of the chitta, the decaying of the chitta is equal. It happens in the same sequence, not sequence, how do you call it, in the same speed, with the same speed. So if two chittas happen together, they would pass away together. And also we discussed that how these halves are equal in terms of time. So in terms of related to decaying of the realities, Theravadians advocate that they have the same speed of decaying. Now we know, according to general relativity, it has been proven, something that has been proven, that the time dilates. I think it's general relativity, if I was correct, not the special relativity and general relativity. If my memory was correct, according to general relativity, there is a time dilation. When the objects move closer to the speed of the light, the time in which it is in dilates. And there has been, and also when someone is into a more higher gravitational field, close to in a higher gravitational field, the time passes away slowly than a person who is in a less stronger gravitational field. And that has been mostly proven with lots of evidence experiments, and also the GPS that we use in our phones are also accurately given to us based on this calculation, that the time dilation. So therefore it is something that has been, and also some subatomic particles, the decaying speed of subatomic particles completely changes when it travels to a speed close to the light. For example, like if it travels 60% of the light of the speed of the light, it may last longer. So therefore, according to the experiments that are scientifically done, they suggest that the decaying speed of this matter has greatly changed based on the speed in which it is in. So the time dilation. So it shows that the decaying speed has stopped. Now think about the related to the nowness. Now when we take about the chitta, rupa, matter, there is nothing called time related to nowness, because the matter doesn't have the cognition, the cognizing ability. It is anaramana, it doesn't take an object. So therefore the decaying of matter, in terms of matter, we can only find the time related to its lifespan. But think about the chitta. Chitta is not just a mere reality like mind, like matter, but it has the cognition. It knows a certain object. So there is something called knowing in a chitta. It's not only, we are not talking about the lifespan of the chitta, and also about the knowing, the experience that we have. So now therefore when we talk about the chitta, it's related to the nowness. So now think about a person, according to the general relativity, some person is traveling in the speed of the light, close to the speed of the light, and someone is located unmoving. So according to that, his body may decay slowly, and he after he returns 50 years, when the person, the stationed person spent 50 years, the person who travels close to the speed of the light would return to that place. He would be less aged, like maybe 30 years, while the person whose body was stationed has grown for 50 years. So looking into this, only the body aspect, we can think the decaying of the rupa has happened slowly, like it happens to the subatomic particles. Then the question that comes is, what was the experience of this second person who traveled? Did he have the similar time of experience like the first person? For instance, now in the divine realm, a divine being could live for 9 million years, while a human lives for 100 years. So what does this mean? Now think, if the human, in the human realm for 100 years, he gets 1 million consciousness, 1 million chittas. So how about in the divine realm? During these 9 million years, does he get only 1 million chittas like a human? Or he gets 1 million chittas within the first 100 years, similar to the man, and then each 100 years he get 1 million chittas. So we count, when it comes to 9 million, so it will become like 9 lakhs into 1 million. 9 lakhs of 1 million chittas, 90,000. So if we think the human for 100 years get 1 million chitta. So if the speed of the chitta is same in both the realms, the deity also gets 1 million for 100 years, 1 million chittas, because the speed of the chitta is same. then for million years, he would get, because it was for 100 years, or if you think about 1 year, for example, 1 year 1 million, for 100 years he may get, for example, if you change the formula, this kind of chittas for 1 year. Then for 100 years he may get, then for 9 million he may get 9 into 1 million, right. So, if we consider the time speed of the chitta is same, the number of chittas which occurred in these two life are different. So, according to the relativity, if we take it as relativity, the human, while the human spend 100 years and this amount of chittas occur, if the time dilation happens and if the speed of the chitta reduces, what happens? For us it's 9 million years, but for him still he has passed 100 years, for instance. So, if that is the case, then the number of chittas would reduce in the divine realm. But this is not how the literature has explained. When we look into that, it has not explicitly mentioned that. When we read the commentaries, when we read the literature, what we found is the speed of the chittas would be the same, but then therefore the number of chittas they have in that entire life is same. So, because for 1 year we may get x number of chittas, for the divine being during the same year they would get the x number of chittas. But thing is, it is mentioned in the Buddhist text. Buddha has mentioned 1 divine day is equal to 50 years of human life. So, now what does this mean? Does it mean that human, for example, 1 day of human, x number of chittas, so 1 day of human, then 1 year of human, x into 365, then 50 years of human, x into 365 into 50. So, this is the number of chittas in 1 day and 50 years. So, what does this formula say? 1 divine day is 50 years of human life. The first formula, first thing is, so they get the same number of chittas. It means in the divine realm you get same number of chittas as 50 years of human realm. Or otherwise, the second way we can think, x, the divine realm, 1 divine day would get x number of chittas, like the humans would get x number of chittas in a 1 day. So, then it is relative, because humans get 1 day x number of chittas. Is it what the Buddha has mentioned? Then a question, if this is so, the speed of chitta is slower of divine beings. If that is speed of chitta is slower in divine beings, then it contradicts with the literature, because Sakka has conversed with the Buddha. He has discussed the Dhamma with the Buddha. So, if the speed of the chitta is greatly slower of the divine being, how could he converse with the Buddha? Then someone can argue it only happens when he comes to the human gravitational field. So, it's different in the divine realm. But I don't think so, because sometimes even the Sakka has observed what is happening in the human realm from the divine realm. So, therefore, we don't go into the second theory. We don't say that the number of x chittas in the human realm, the number is same for 1 divine day. No, 1 divine day is equal to 50 human years. So, therefore, the number of chittas in the human realm for 50 years is equal to the number of chittas for a divine being in 1 day. So, this relativity is only for the naming of the day and the years. not for the speed of the chitta. But when we think about the idea of relativity, it says that when someone has traveled similar to the speed of the light, when he returns, while the man who was stationed is 50 years, the person, not exactly the speed of the light, then the time stops, according to the theory, close to the speed of the light. When he returns, he has only aged for 30 years. So what theory is, now the question is, based on this scientific theory, has he had the same number of chittas during his travel? Okay, we can imagine that the body has not decayed like it happens to subatomic particles. What about the number of chittas? So if we take one chitta as a one experience, while the person who has stationed got 50 into x number of experiences, if we say x is the number of experiences in one day, for example, so x into 365 into 50 is the experience the person who stationed had. So did the person who traveled, now this is the question, I think I'll draw it. Now person who stationed, the number of chittas he had was x number of experiences. If this is the number of experiences in one day, this is how much he would get in 350. The person who traveled the speed of the light and returned here, so he has aged only 50 years. This person has aged only 30 years. So what is the number of chittas? Now the decaying of the body is okay, because we know that the subatomic particles decay slowly when it travels faster. So it is obvious that we can imagine or think about this incident. So now what about the experience? Now 50 years to the body. How about the experience? Did he have, how much of experiences he had? So we have y, number of experiences per day, for example 365 into 30. We take it y, the day of experiences per day is y. So are they equal or are they not equal? This is the question that one has to think. The moment experience, the moment of now while traveling, according to the theory of relativity, is it the same? I hope you got the idea. So what I'll repeat it again because it was something complicated. A person who is stationed while he has aged 50 years, according to the theory of relativity, he travels with the speed of close to the speed of light, has aged only 30 years. Okay, that's about the rupa. What about his experience that he had? Did he have a similar time of experience, a number of experiences as a person who was living for 50 years? Because according to this question comes in the Theravada perspective, because scientifically I don't think we define it in mind moments. We define it mostly based on the time. So this question doesn't come much in the scientific idea. But when we put this into the mind moment theory, we know that there are number of consciousness per day, x, and this number of consciousness has occurred to this person. So did the person who traveled had the similar number of experiences, or that number also reduced due to his travel? If it has reduced, the speed of the chitta has to reduce. If it has not, only this time dilation is applied to the decaying of the body, not to onto the rupa, not to the mind. It's a question that I'm unable to answer. I'm just giving a question about how to look into the reality of the theory of general relativity based on the mind moment theory. One more thing is, we talked about time dilation and we talked about the time travel. We talk about the time travel. We normally know time has a one direction. Space has 3 dimensions. We can go either this way or that way, for the completely opposite ways, or up and down. Front and back, left and right, and up and down. But space, even we go to the left and left, we can still come back, come to the right. Even we go forward, we can come backwards. But time has no return. It's just moving one way. It's from past to future. So normally, because the theory of causality prohibits the returning of time, normally the greatest obstacle for the time travel is, like for example, if two parents come together, the third child is born. So if we travel through the time, and if some parent was killed, what happens to this child? This is the very basic argument made by Western philosophers for the time, against the time travel. It contradicts with the theory of causality, right? So this is the very basic argument they have. There can be counter answers for this. I'm not saying this has been proven, this has been debunked. This is the greatest obstacle that they face talking about time travel. Now think about in Theravada perspective. Is it possible? The time travel, is it possible? The question, consciousness arises and passes away. This is one experience. Separate experiences. Now imagine the time travel is possible. How do we travel to the past? This is the normal sequence if time travel is possible. Now think about these four chittas, A, B, C, D. Now think we go back for 5 minutes and live in the moment that has already we have spent. Now how do we travel through the time? How could we revise this? Are we jumping from D to C, or do we have to go like that? For the how it has gone forth is from the chitta has strengthened and passed away, and then it has strengthened and passed away. These are one experiences. So if we travel through time, so think that we came into this moment, this experience. So are we getting this experience in this way or this way? If the time travel is reversing the incident, how do we revise it? For example, I was standing here. So suddenly, if I travel through time, I'll be here again. So one may think that how did I travel? That my leg had to, all the actions I did has to be reversed. That's how we rewind in a videotape. But think about the consciousness. So when we travel through time from chitta D to C, do we travel suddenly from here to here and then come from here? Or do we need to travel like this? Like passing away consciousness suddenly come into strength, and then it comes into the arising. So shouldn't it be a completely reversing process, rewinding process? So therefore, there are problems with time travel in terms of the consciousness theory, as the Theravadians advocate. So Theravadians do not appreciate the idea of time travel. So according to the Buddha, yadati tang pahinantang, what has happened has completely passed away. It's no more. You cannot revise. You cannot bring back the past. You cannot arouse the same chitta that has already passed away. There was a Buddhist sect called the Sarvastivadins, not the Theravadians, Sarvastivadins, who advocated that the realities in the past do exist even at this moment. Realities that will occur in the future also do exist in this moment. According to them, they are not talking about time travel. The past realities, the present realities, and future realities, they exist in a different form. They also exist in a different form. Only the present moment they get manifest as a reality. So this was called Sarvastivadin, Sarvasti. Vadin. That what does it mean? Sarvasti. Sarva is all. Sab, asti, exist. In Sanskrit, in Sinhalese also, Sarva asti. Sarva astivadins, who advocated that past, present and future all exist. All exist even at this moment. Their argument was, that is why we can know the past, because the past exists in a certain manner. That's why we can know the future. But the Theravadians said, past is past, future is future. Both have not occurred. Only the present moment exists. It is an ability of the chitta. It is a capacity of the chitta to know something that has already passed. It is capacity of the chitta to know something that is going to happen. Other than that, the chitta, past and present, doesn't exist. So therefore, these are the points that I would like to share. We discussed about the space. Space is considered as existing, but it is not considered as a paramatta dhamma, but it has the attributes of unconditioned qualities, the asankata paramatta, asankata realities, unconditioned realities, but it is not the nirvana that have been discussed in the Theravada tradition. So we normally don't discuss about it in detail, the space, but sometimes some teachers have mentioned it as something unconditioned because it doesn't have an arising. Then regarding the time is something that is synthesized in the mind based on the looking into the generation of realities, and normally we bring the idea of time as a fundamental to define the consciousness, but when we look into the deeper, we find that time is not a fundamental. Theravadians can define the chitta without the idea of fundamental time. Then, so it's according to Theravada, it's a concept. Then we talked about the relativity, and also the Theravadians explained existing of space, no time. Then we talked about the relativity of time, how the divine realm and the human realm, the decaying process happens slowly, but the speed of the consciousness is the same. And then we brought the question of time dilation. So how the nowness has to be explained. When we combine these two theories of the general relativity with the consciousness theory, so decaying has lessened, that is obvious, that is been proven. So but still, what about the experience in the consciousness that we have to think further. And then about the time travel, why the Theravadians do not advocate the time travel, because if you want to reverse the process, it should be, if it is a perfect reversing, it has to be the consciousness which passed away became strengthened and then again lessened, and then comes to the right consciousness. It should not be from jumping from consciousness to another consciousness. But normally when we rewind a videotape, it goes from clip to clip. It goes from clip to clip. So then then we have to travel from conscious to consciousness. From here, we travel to the beginning of the C consciousness or beginning of D consciousness suddenly. Not in this process. We have to travel like this if time travel is possible according to Theravada tradition. Because it's unlikely that the process completely revises. Then about the past, present, future existence, about the Sarvastivadins and how the Theravadins advocate. So therefore, time travel is not possible according to Theravadians. Theravadians consider past has completely vanished and future has not yet come. Yeah. So this will be the points that I would like to discuss in the lecture, which was something little advanced, and I hope you got the idea, and I'll open the forum for the Q&A session.
Hi Bhante, I have one question. Have you found anywhere in the literature where one divine day is defined, Bhante? What does it mean by one divine day?
It's a very good question. Why Buddha mentioned in the sutta to Visakha, the lady Visakha. You can find, if my memory was correct, Uposatha Sutta, and also you can find it in the Vibhanga, Dhammahade Vibhanga, and also mentioned in a sutta preached to Visakha, the lady Visakha. He mentioned one divine day is 50 years of human life. So this idea of relativity suggests, is he talking about there can be two ideas like number of chittas or the speed of the decaying of the matter. So it has not been clearly mentioned. It has not been clearly mentioned. Only what has been mentioned is one divine day in the Chaturmaharajika is 50 years of human life. One divine day in the Tavatinsa is 100 years of human life. But it has not been clearly mentioned is the number of consciousness happening in one divine day is equal to the 100 years in human life. But it seems that is the idea. Otherwise, there will be a huge lag in the speed of the consciousness, and divine beings will be unable to cope with us as we do together with us.
Right. So I mean, I guess my question is, for example, like you say, if we define one day in the human being realm, that is maybe based on the rising and the rising of the sun, right? This is 1 day. So what does it mean by 1 day? Why is it called 1 day in the
Yeah, that's
realm?
the why is that I haven't found any information on that. Sorry.
I see.
Yeah, I think it's based on the human realm. That's how the Buddha has divided. There's no day and night in the divine realm. We haven't seen that it fell night in the divine realm, so though the devas slept. No, there's no such a thing. But they do sleep. They do sleep, but not. I'm not sure how the process happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Sir, actually, I don't know whether I missed some of the parts of the lecture. The first of all, what is the you I think mentioned as an example, if you travel, if you do time travel, does it mean that the time will be less or something? I didn't understand. You said okay, so one person travels 50 days or 50 years, and then when he comes back, it will be 30 years, something like that. Is that right?
No, that is if he travels to close to the speed of the light. Now, for example, it has been proven that the subatomic particles have a certain lifespan, but when you accelerate it, its lifespan expands. It can last for longer. So that is the theory of relativity. So I'm not saying it's correct or wrong. It is something. In fact, it is something that has been proven. So, but I don't think it has been tested in terms of humans. So according to that theory, if we take that theory as a fact, so if it travels closer to the speed of the light, not exactly the speed of the light, closer to the speed of the light, 5, right? Yeah, per meters per hour, meters per second, closer, then his body would decay slowly. So then that's why I get the example. Imagine while a station person is 50 years, the traveling person is 30 years. So the body decaying, okay, we may be able to prove it with experiments, but how about his consciousness? How much of experiences that he had?
So, but actually, is it really relevant to us or for the Buddhist teachings?
Because it's something that has been proven, the time dilation. You cannot ignore it, because the GPS is also based on time dilation. If there was the formula has been used, it is something that we cannot ignore while we are living in this world. That's why I brought this issue, because when we talk about the neutrino clocks, atomic clocks, they have already tested it, and we do take the benefits out of this theory of time dilation. If the time dilation theory was not applied, the GPS would change dramatically, and we will unable to be taken the exact location. So our GPS has been now the satellites, when they give us the information, the number they get has to be refined by the time dilation theory. Then they give us the information. Only then we get the accurate information.
But that is again that is according to the theories that we know now. It can even change.
The theory can be changed, the suggestion can be changed, but the implementation has been already applied. It's like it's something that has been practically used. Like for example, the functioning of the plane, the mechanism of the plane, it has something been proven. It's a fact that we can fly. It doesn't change even how much science changed. The fact that we can fly is a true. So likewise, we can get the accurate GPS. It's a fact, and it has been given to us, letting the information through this time dilation formula. So it's also something that has been utilized in the technical world. So I don't think these things they can improve, or they can bring another theory to explain what has happened. But they have every 2 minutes they are sending one beam of subatomic particles in a certain lab every 2 minutes, and they test it each and every time for many years. For thousands of hundreds thousands of times, they have the evidences that the subatomic particle which travels close to the speed of light lives longer than a stationed subatomic particle. Maybe the theory may change, how they explain may change, but the fact that it decays slowly is found as a fact.
And also, the second question I had, I think that's like the time frame of a mind, the mind moment. How do we know actually the two people have the same time frame? I mean, how do you know that?
Yeah, practically we won't be able to say it, but what I said was, if a Theravadian would try to explain it, that is how he would bring up the theory. It won't be practically, he won't be able to practically do it. Only thing is that theoretically we can bring an argument to say that we don't need the time, fundamental of time, to define the consciousness. It's not practically, I'm not talking, theoretically we can bring an argument to show that we don't need. There is a way to prove, because the question that comes is when we say consciousness, each consciousness have the same lifespan, and the rising moment and the passing away moment also has the same lifespan. So then come and can ask the question easily, you define the consciousness based on time, so time should be fundamental than consciousness. To answer that question only, I brought this theoretical idea. Otherwise, as you said, I don't think it is practically can be proven. Only a person like Buddha or someone would be able to, we imagine, would be able to say something.
And also, on the other hand, actually, it doesn't mean that we have to experience everything.
No. Yeah, I didn't mean that. It was just a theoretical thing for the sake of argument. For the sake of argument.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sadhu. There was a name.
The question is, how does learning cosmology help one become a better Buddhist?
How does one, okay, that is relative, I've called. That is relative. Like Buddha himself has mentioned some of the cosmological things in the teachings. How an earthquake can happen, what is an moon eclipse, how many types of lions are there, 4 types of lions. So he has mentioned the cosmology in some sutras. So my personal view is, it may not be relevant to some Buddhists, but for some it may be, because we cannot know the temperaments of different characters. For some the faith is necessary, for some the inquiry is necessary, for some the effort is necessary, some the motivation is necessary. So for example, just explaining the cosmology, seeing the diversity, one could have lots of urgency. Now knowing that cosmology has no ends and there will be infinite number of beings and the number is never going to end. Knowing that, we understand how tiny we are in this entire universe, and we feel how insignificant our work is compared to the entire universe. There will be, according to the Buddhist theory, there are humans living in other universes and doing similar kind of things, having the kingship, having ruling the country, sometimes the universal monarchs maybe. So maybe there are universal monarchs. Some books say there cannot be, but anyway, so there are great kings. So then we find how insignificant we are compared to the entire universe, and then we get the urgency. So I once had such an urgency. So it depends on the character, I think. It depends on the character. So for some it may not be that much relevant, for some it may be relevant. So when we talk about an entire literature, a philosophy, it's our duty to discuss all what has been mentioned. And that was the greatness of the Buddha. He didn't only focus on the intellectual or spiritual practice. He also advocated such other things like the cosmology and the lifespan of the divine realm, the lifespan of this hell to arouse the urgency. And also the Moggallana was trying to travel to find out the end of the universe. And there are certain things, and likewise. So we cannot say the range of the Savakas so huge. So there may be Savakas that can have. Now seeing the diversity of the animal realm, Buddha has mentioned there are 4 types of lions. So then one can ask the question, what is the purpose of knowing 4 types of lions? So what I see is, seeing the diversity of the animal realm is a path to have the urgency depending on the person. So it's very difficult for us to judge how this teaching would affect each and every listener, especially when it comes to an audience like the Buddhist audience. And the Buddha was preaching not only to the humans but also the divine beings and also to the Brahmas. So maybe he had the, personally I think his teachings are relevant to the liberation in one way or another, and it also greatly depends on the temperament of the person who is listening.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Please go ahead, Sayali Uttama.
Yes, Sally.
Thank you so much for this very deep lecture. When we thank you for introducing the way of viewing time and space in the Nama point of view and Rupa point of view, which is very new. I have a question regarding time. You know, there are many meanings of time also in English especially. For example, when we say something like, it is the right time to do something, it is not the right time to do something. So I guess there should be another point of view regarding some other definition of time, not just the long time, short time. I agree, long time, short time is a kind of dynamic, a concept we can relate with our mind. So my question is, like, in your first chart of Paramattha and Danyati and the one in between, where should we put the Paccaya Sati in the first chart, the Paramattha, Sankata, Asankata, some Lakshana and Danyati, that thing? Where is it? And why do you put because that related to my question about time also. And where do you put the Dhamma and Dhammata in that chart? That is my first question.
So Dhammata cannot be put into that chart actually. Dhammata has to be something apart from that. It's completely something that governs the entire ultimacy. So Dhammata is a huge thing, huge topic. It's the Dhammata, when I say Dhammata, is the causality. Another word for Dhammata is the law. Causality is also part of that, Causality is a part of that, is the law. So it's a huge thing. It encompasses everything. Everything means all the theory of ultimacy is within it. Then when you say the Paccaya some of the Paccaya that exist apart from the reality were located in between Ekacca Paccaya. The other Paccaya embodied in the reality itself. So rather than we mentioning that it as a different section, we would say each and every Paramattha Dhamma has a characteristic, has a function, and has an ability. So that ability is the Paccaya. So rather than putting it into another section, we would explain Paramattha Dhammas have characteristics, that is their body, that is their identity, the characteristic and the reality is the same. Then they have functions and they have certain abilities, the capacities. So that's how I would explain the Paccaya. But what happened, Ekacca Paccaya means some Paccaya. They do exist apart from the reality. So like Anantara, Asevana and Pakatupanisaya. Then Kamma Paccaya is a special thing. So that's why it was put as in the Paramattha Jatika group. Because Kamma Sati is, the Vipaka is considered as the Kamma Sati, ripening, according to the literature. So it has some kind of a different attribute than the Anantara, Samanantara and Pakatupanisaya. So that's why I put it in a different place. So that is it. And then regarding the Kala, as you asked the question, sometimes there is a word called Kana. Kala is normally the time, the morning time, the evening time. That's how we have defined it. Another close word is Kana. Kana is the occasion, which is also similar to the time. So regarding this Kana, they have 8 Kana, Dutta Kana. So which are the times that are not relevant, not supportive for the attainment. Dutta Kana, 8. Born in the hells, born as Petas, animals, born in the Arupa realm, Asanya Satta, born as a Michaditti person, like a strong Michaditti person, and born in an area where the Buddhas cannot be found, and also born during when a Buddha's Dhamma is not prevailing, and also far away districts, right? So these are 8 Dutta. Ninth Kana, ninth one is what we are experiencing now. We have the Buddha's teachings, we are born as humans, we have that, we are not following the wrong views strong wrong views, and we have the opportunity to listen to Dhamma and so forth. We are in the 9th Kana. So the 8 Kanas are not supportive for the enlightenment of the Savakas. Out of the 8, when someone is freed from hells, woeful realms, the Brahma realms, the Asanya Satta and Arupa realm, and born as a human being, even the Buddha's Dhamma is not prevailing, two types of beings could attain the liberation, that is Pacceka Buddhas and Samma Sambuddhas. For the Savakas, all we have to be freed from all 8, and we have to be in the ninth Khana. That is something related to the Khana. It is also something kind of a Kala. So we can call Buddhupada Kala and so forth. The word Kala may have some other meanings, but this is for Khana actually, but you can apply it for Kala as well. But short time, long time is mostly what we consider. And when we come into the grammatical point of view, we have Pachuppanna Kala, we have Atita Kala and so forth. There is a theory in the grammatically, Kaloti Kriya. Action itself is the Kala. Sometimes the past action, the present action, the future action is the Kala. So Kaloti Karo, Kaloti Karo. Karo is Kriya, the action itself. Ra become La, La become Ra, Ra become La. Yeah. So that is in terms of grammar. But in terms of Abhidhamma, it's considered as a concept. So how do we define the Kala in the Nirodha Samapatti time? Based on the conscious process of another being. Like while a person had 100 consciousness, during that time Arahant was in the Nirodha Samapatti. So we could call the time of 100 consciousness, he was in the attainment or cessation. So likewise we are able to define the time. Always we define the time based on the consciousness. Yeah.
In that,
yeah, please.
for the Karo, can we say that also define a 1 day time for the divine being also, like based on how much activity they are supposed to accomplish
during one? Then we are coming, activity is based on the consciousness, right? Number of consciousness per day or something. Do you mean like that? We can say, yeah.
Well, the number of consciousness and activities can be different.
Okay.
Because Sawanga also would be counted.
Right.
So it's just pondering.
Okay. So,
my other question, can I say another question?
yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, so the other one is about the Ladokasa Karma. So, Okasa, that one, the Karma gain the opportunity. So how can you define that gaining opportunity, and how does it relate it to this Kala thing?
This Kala thing.
Yeah, thank you. Because I was thinking like Ladokasa Karma can have some relationship to Kala.
This is Karma. Karma gets the opportunity. Karma gets the opportunity. So it is supposed to happen one time. So therefore, for example, if this is the time, now it has gained the opportunity. Gaining the opportunity means it has become activated to give a result. So it's something that while a certain consciousness is present, a karma gets the opportunity. So it's always related to the time, because time is based on the consciousness process. So therefore, while this consciousness was present, this karma got the opportunity, and it may give results. It has not given the results yet, but it has come into the surface over the other karmas. Other karmas. So while other karmas are here, this karma has come into the surface, means it has gained the opportunity to give a result. So likewise, it has come forward. So when a karma has gained the opportunity, it may not immediately, it may give result in some occasions, immediately, quickly, very quickly, within even few consciousness. Sometimes it have gained the opportunity, but it may give the result in many days or many years sometimes. So like what happens now, if someone does any of the 5 heinous deeds, at the moment he accomplished that deed, that karma gets the opportunity, and that karma which has gained the opportunity cannot be prevented by any means. That is why we say If you do a heinous deed, it's sure, you are sure to be in the hell. It's not because it's going to come, get the opportunity close to death. 5 heinous deeds, the karmas would get the opportunity immediately as it is been done. And it cannot be prevented by whatever means. So therefore, gaining the opportunity and the resultant moment are 2 different occasions. The moment the karma is done, the karma gaining the opportunity, most of the cases it happens later, but with the heinous deeds, it happens as soon as the karma has been done. As soon as the karma, the consciousness which passes away, this chetana, the heinous deeds, when it's done, it has gained the opportunity already over the other karmas. So this cannot be prevented by any means, but its result would happen later on. So some karmas, as soon as the karma was done, gain the opportunity. In most of the cases, after some time, it gets the opportunity and gives it. So the karmas that gain the opportunity can be prevented. Some can be prevented, some cannot be prevented. 5 heinous deeds cannot be prevented by whatever means. Only if he has done another strong heinous deed, it may get the opportunity over this. That's the only way, that you have to do a more stronger heinous deed to get not preventing this, to get something else. And this will be very supportive to this karma. It will strengthen the vipaka. Then, other than the heinous deeds, sometimes there are certain akusalas and kusalas that would get the opportunity. Among them, some are unpreventable. That's why Buddha mentioned, na antalikke na samudda majje na pabbatanang vivaram pavissa na vijjati so jagati padeso yattattito munchayya papakama. So I don't see any place in the entire world, the sea, the sky, or in the mountains, where one can be freed from the results of the karma. That is talking about the karmas that have gained the opportunity and unpreventable. Like what happened in the story of King Duttagamini or King or the father of Venerable Sona. They were about to be born in the hells, and the akusala karmas gained the opportunity, but they could be prevented by some other means. So even the karmas that gain the opportunity, there are something that cannot be prevented. What happened to Moggallana? The karma gained the opportunity close to his death. Even his psychic powers could not prevent it. For the 4th time he tried to fly, 4th time his iddhi, the psychic powers, the one commentary says his psychic powers were subdued, became inactive, like a bird whose wings have been cut off. That was the simile given. So likewise, some karmas cannot be prevented. Always gaining the opportunity and the resulting moment happens different times. So even at this moment, we have the karmas which have gained the opportunity.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu. And there is one more question from the audience.
Okay.
So this one is a little bit long. So,
okay, it's okay.
If there are 4 types of lions, so did the Buddha mention the types of human gender, as in female, male, transgender, and bi-spirited? And then this person said that one sutta seemed to mention a monk who spent too much time with nuns. So perhaps he was a transgender and saw himself as female. So did the Buddha acknowledge that or not, and why?
I need the 4th type. What was that? Transgender, and the last one is?
It's bi, Bhante.
Bi means Ubbato Banjana? What is it?
I mean both. Yes.
Both sex, right? So according to the literature, it's another important question. We discussed this topic in detail when we come to the Bhava Rupa, the topic of Bhava Rupa. So we have male. I'll write the Pali words. Purisa, Itti. Then we have Napunsaka, Ubato Byanjanaka, right? And then we have another one called Pandaka. These are the things that we can find in the Buddha's teachings. So Purisa is a male, Itti is a female, Napunsaka is neither male, no female. Ubato Byanjanaka have both the sex organ. But the thing is, even though he or she has both the sex organs, they are defined as male and female. It is mentioned a female Ubato Bhyanjanaka is capable of making others pregnant and also making themselves pregnant, can get pregnant. Male Ubato Bhyanjanakas can make the others pregnant but not make, he cannot get pregnant. So that is how it has been mentioned. So therefore, even though they have possessed both organs, they are still defined as Purisa and Iti. But the Napunsaka one doesn't have any male or female organ. So therefore, he can be considered as the third gender, but we normally have these 1 and 2 genders. Napunsaka is the one who doesn't have a gender. And when this one is either is as a gender, because but he has both the sex organs. Pandaka is a person, there are 5 types of Pandaka. One is Napunsaka is also included as a Pandaka. Some have some extreme sexual desires. And also the male whose testicles have been removed also considered as a Pandaka in the literature. So it's a different topic. It's nothing much referred to the gender. It's a special person, special means person who has high sexual desires. Some are very difficult to control, and then of whom the testicles, the male whose testicles has been removed. And there are some words calling about Iti Pandaka, the female Pandakas as well. But so there is not a separate gender. They are not a separate gender. Only thing we can find is 2 genders, and this is as another gender. Then we talk about transgender. Transgender is male becoming a female, female becoming a male, and it has happened during Buddha's time. One monk suddenly became a female and a nun became a male, and Buddha acknowledged it and acknowledged what has happened. Acknowledge means he had accepted it, and he said the male monk who became a female should go to the female nunnery and start to live there, and he should not be discriminated by any means, and she should not be discriminated, and she gets the rules. She has to follow the rules of the nuns, and her vasas, her experience, the life seniority in the monkhood will not be reduced. She can keep her seniority. And the female bhikkhuni who became a male was was asked to go to the male section and live with the monks, and he did not need to reduce his seniority, but he had to follow all the rules from that day onwards that are supposed to be followed, that were laid down for the monks. Surely it has happened with the elapsing of time slowly, but the monk informed it into the nuns in one night. Maybe that was the night that he got convinced that he has already become a female, or the female got convinced that she has become already a male. Surely it has to happen with a long process, but the commentary says it has happened overnight, but I don't think it is a logical thing to happen, because it's a transformation of the entire body. So normally we know there's a transgender, so in between that is a transgender, but still, as long as he or she is not considered as a male or a female, the final transformation happens. It's very difficult to say how a monk or a nun knows that his gender has completely changed. So after he or she is convinced that she or she is a male or a female, that is the time he has to express it to the monks and the nuns, and then she has to go into the different groups. So it's not Buddha has accepted that, and Buddha has given the rule that if transgender happens, how should we react on that? How should we react on that? Work based on that. So that is what we find in the literature. So the transgender is a thing that is accepted, and it can happen, and there are protocols that how do we need to follow. There is no discrimination in it. All the seniority, but whatever the faults the male has done before becoming a female, if those faults are also common to the bhikkhuni's rules, if they are common faults, she has to purify them. If he has done some offenses which are not common to the bhikkhunis, she does not need to purify them, because after becoming a female, even she turns back again to a male, she does not need to remedy them. And same thing happens to the bhikkhuni changing into a monk, male. The new he, if he has transgressed rules that are common to both bhikkhu and bhikkhunis, he has to purify them. If he has done, being a she has done rules that are only for the bhikkhunis, not for the monks, the new he doesn't need to purify them. Even his gender again changes into a female, she does not need to purify those rules that were already abandoned, that are only common to the bhikkhunis. On then onwards, she has to follow the bhikkhunis rules as they have been mentioned. So there is no discrimination at all in the Buddha's teachings for this transgender moment, that the period has not been addressed. It is not recognized as a separate gender within the Buddhist teachings. Still, a male in the process of becoming a female considered as a male. A female in the process of becoming a male is considered as a female. So only when he or she is convinced that she or he has changed into that, especially with the sex organ, then they would be considered as new males or females.
So there is one, I don't know whether or not it's a comment or question because it's written in Sinhalese.
Okay. Okay. So then we conclude the class. Thank you for joining and wish you all the best. And may this merit of discussing Dhamma help us to attain our liberation. And may with this merit, may the sasana prolong for a longer period. Buddha sasanang chirantiktatu. Buddha sasanang chirantiktatu. Buddha sasanang chirantiktatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.